I was 13 when silence became my enemy. But let me begin from the beginning. They call me Yusuf. I came into this world in a small Muslim village where dust settled on everything. Our shoes, our water containers, even our breath. Quiet was the law of our home, and terror ruled over it. My father's word was absolute. When he spoke, nobody dared interrupt. When he walked into a room, even the atmosphere seemed to surrender. His beard stretched long, dark with silver threads. His hands were rough, not from tenderness, from labor, from violence, from gripping the rod he wielded to control us. He once told me, "A worthy son follows before he comprehends." So I followed. My mother barely raised her gaze. She drifted like a shadow, preparing meals, scrubbing floors, veiling her face. Her hands were split like parched earth. I can't recall her ever smiling. Only stillness. Only fear. I spent my childhood learning the Quran under flickering candles, sitting with legs folded on earthen floors, swaying with other boys, echoing Arabic words that held no meaning for me. Submission was hammered into me until it felt natural as breathing. My father declared, "Better a deceased son than a defiant one." So I perished within early on. I yearned for something else, for kindness, for someone to meet my eyes and declare, "I acknowledge you, Yusuf. You have worth." But nobody ever did. The mosque instilled discipline in me. My father instilled dread. My mother instilled silence. And I bore all three like shackles. If you've grown up feeling unseen, if you've craved love but received only regulations, then perhaps you can understand me already. My childhood wasn't really childhood. It was preparation for bondage, to faith, to reputation, to the burden of being my father's heir. I recall one particular evening. I must have been around 7. My father struck me for mispronouncing a passage during Quran study. I fumbled through the Arabic and his palm crashed hard against my cheek. I tumbled to the earth, blood on my mouth. My mother looked away. She wouldn't dare step in. I stared at her, wordlessly pleading for help, but her attention stayed fixed on the cooking pot. She kept stirring. That evening I whispered into the blackness, "Allah, can you see me?" Silence replied. Years went by. My frame grew higher, my shoulders wider, but within I stayed small, defeated, starving for something I couldn't identify. Then everything shifted. My father, the man who commanded our household like a dictator, became ill. It struck without warning. A cough, a fever, then frailty. He refused to acknowledge it initially. He continued yelling, continued hitting us when we disappointed him. But his voice grew fainter, his movements slower. One dawn, I awakened to a sound I'd never heard before. My father moaning in agony. He lay on his sleeping mat, grasping his chest. My mother hovered close by, powerless, murmuring prayers. The Imam arrived reciting passages, sprinkling blessed water. But the illness wouldn't depart. Within weeks, my father, the man who appeared indestructible, could no longer stand for prayer. His voice, once like thunder, became a wheeze. His hand, once powerful, shook when he attempted to raise a cup. And then he was gone. No extended farewell, no gentle words, just quiet. I was 12. My siblings cried. My mother crumbled into tears I'd never witnessed before. And me. I felt hollow, bewildered, frightened. Because if my father, the most powerful man I knew, could fall into the earth, what did that mean for me? That evening, lying awake, I whispered once more, "Allah, do you see me now? Do you care?" Again, silence. I didn't realize then, but my father's death wasn't just the end of his reign. It was the start of something darker, something that would challenge me in ways I couldn't foresee. But before I share that, let me stop here. If stories like mine resonate with you, stories of people imprisoned in silence, people seeking truth, then I ask you, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment and share it. Not for my sake, but for those still trapped in cages of fear. Your simple action might help liberate someone, because I was still caged, and the lock was about to get tighter. The days following my father's death were a haze. The village murmured about honor, about obedience, about who would assume his position as head of the family. They looked toward me. I was the oldest son, the one expected to bear his legacy. But how could a boy, broken and afraid, carry the weight of a man I never knew? Still, I attempted. I prayed with more intensity. I fasted for longer periods. I recited the Quran with accuracy, desperate to prove myself deserving, desperate to earn love I had never received. But love never arrived. Only expectation, only pressure, only shadows. And then came the moment that transformed everything. One evening, as the sun descended low and painted our village in crimson light, my uncle came to visit. He sat with me, his hand heavy on my shoulder. His words were gentle, but they carried venom. "Yusuf," he said, "your father has departed. You are the man now. You must care for your mother in every way." At first, I didn't grasp it. His smile chilled me. The Imam nodded. Beside him, my mother sat motionless, eyes downcast, silent as always. And then the meaning hit me. They weren't discussing protection. They weren't discussing provision. They were discussing something else, something unthinkable. My blood turned cold. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, but no sound emerged. That was the moment I realized the silence of my childhood was about to become the silence of my spirit. After my father died, the house transformed, but not how I thought it would. I imagined maybe, just maybe, life would feel easier without his fists, without his voice echoing like thunder in every corner, without the endless orders and corrections. But the house didn't become easier. It became more oppressive. The silence was thicker now. My mother's crying turned into a constant hush, the kind you carry in your chest but never release. My siblings looked at me differently. Their eyes were filled with questions I couldn't answer. I was only 12, but suddenly they looked at me as though I was supposed to be a man. The Imam and the elders didn't waste time. They came to the house, sitting cross-legged on our mats, drinking tea, stroking their beards. They spoke words I didn't fully grasp, words like honor and obedience and responsibility. They looked at me and said, "Yusuf, your father has departed. You are the man of the house now. You must lead, you must protect, you must carry his legacy." Protect what? Carry what? I was just a boy, but no one cared about that. I tried to be strong. I tried to pray more. I memorized longer chapters. I recited them at night until my throat was raw. But it never felt like enough. No matter how much I prayed, Allah's silence consumed me whole. And then came the stairs. The men in the village didn't look at me like a boy anymore. They looked at me like a project, like a responsibility, like a vessel for my father's legacy. And the women? Some of them whispered when they saw me. Some of them stared at my mother, shaking their heads, pity in their eyes. It was as if we had become an unfinished story, and everyone was waiting to see who would write the ending. My mother changed too. She became smaller, if that was even possible. Her shoulders hunched, her eyes stayed fixed on the ground. She barely spoke. It was as though when my father died, her voice died with him. But in the shadows, something worse was forming. My uncle began to visit more frequently. At first I thought he was being kind. He brought food. Sometimes he told me stories of my father, how respected he was, how feared. He said I needed to be like him. He patted my shoulder with heavy hands, telling me I must grow into a lion. But there was something in his eyes, something cold, something calculating. He started making comments that didn't sit right with me. Small at first. "Your mother is still young. A woman cannot live without a man's covering. It is your duty now." I didn't fully understand. I told myself I was mishearing, that he didn't mean what I thought. But then he said it clearer. One evening after the mosque, he pulled me aside. His breath smelled of strong tea. His words cut like knives. "Yusuf, your father has departed. You must fulfill his role even for your mother." My chest tightened, my hands trembled. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a cruel joke. But he didn't laugh. His eyes were deadly serious. I wanted to shout, "That's evil, that's disgusting." But the words stuck in my throat. The Imam stood nearby. He didn't correct my uncle. He didn't rebuke him. Instead, he stroked his beard and nodded slowly, as if this was wisdom, as if this was holy. I looked at my mother. She was sitting inside the house, her hands busy with sewing. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. And that silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It told me everything she knew. She had heard these whispers before, and she had no strength left to fight them. Something inside me cracked. I was supposed to become my father. I was supposed to do what he did, to strike, to dominate, to defile. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in. That night I lay on my mat, staring at the ceiling, my body trembling. The shadows of the lantern danced across the walls, and I felt like they were mocking me, laughing at me, choking me. The words replayed in my mind, fulfill his role, even for your mother. No, no, no! I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block it out, but the words had already burrowed into my bones. And here's the thing. When an entire community, when your own family, when even the imam of the mosque tells you something is your duty, part of you starts to wonder, could it be true? Is this really what Allah expects of me? I hated myself for even thinking it, for even letting the question in. But I was drowning. I was only a boy, and everyone around me was telling me this was honor, this was obedience, this was Islam. I remember whispering into the night again, Allah, do you see me? Do you want this from me? But once again, silence. And silence can be more terrifying than any scream. If you've ever been pressured into something that felt wrong, if you've ever been told that sin was holy, that abuse was love, that slavery was freedom, maybe you know what I felt in that moment. I was trapped, not just in my house, not just in my village, but in my soul. That year, the year after my father died, was a year of shadows. Shadows of grief, shadows of confusion, shadows of whispers that twisted my stomach into knots. Every time my uncle visited, I felt his eyes on me. Every time the imam preached about obedience, I felt like the sermon was aimed straight at me. Every time my mother looked away, I felt abandoned, and inside something was breaking. I didn't know it yet, but those shadows were about to grow darker, much darker, because the night was coming. The night when the unthinkable would be spoken aloud. The night when my world, my faith, my identity, my very soul would collapse under the weight of betrayal, and nothing would ever be the same again. The night it happened, the lantern burned low and the room smelled like dust and old tea. The walls listened, the floor held its breath. My uncle sat cross-legged, his robe gathered neatly, his eyes like stones in a dry riverbed. The imam was there too, stroking his beard, saying nothing, letting silence do the speaking. My mother kept to the corner, hands in her lap, eyes lowered to a threadbare rug she had stared at her entire marriage. Yusuf, my uncle began, voice smooth, practiced. A year has passed since your father returned to Allah. You are a man now, the man of this house. I nodded because that's what boys like me did. Nod, obey, disappear. He leaned in. A man protects what is his. He fulfills what is lacking. He takes up every duty your father left behind. Every duty. Those two words landed like stones in my stomach. He kept talking about honor, about purity, about shame avoided when a household remains whole. He said these things slowly, carefully, like he wanted each word to enter me and take root. The imam said nothing, only nodded at the right places, like punctuation marks of approval. I waited for someone to laugh, for someone to say, "We're testing you, Yusuf. We wanted to see if you understood the responsibilities of provision, of leadership." I wanted my mother to gasp and stand up and say, "Enough!" No one laughed. No one stood. Something cold slid down my spine. "I will work," I said quickly. "I will bring food. I will fix the roof. I will." My uncle cut me off with a soft cluck of his tongue. "It is not only money." The room shrank. The air thickened. I heard my own heartbeat, loud, desperate, trapped. I don't want to repeat the rest of his words. Some horrors don't deserve echoes. He twisted religion until it bent like hot metal. He stacked phrases about obedience and family, and covering like stones around a grave. He dressed sin in holy clothing and called it honor. He made filth sound like duty. The imam finally spoke. "The community is watching." That was all. 4 words, enough to strangle a boy. I looked at my mother. She did not look up. Her hands trembled. Her mouth was a thin line of surrender. The woman who taught me to be quiet had been crushed by quietness. I wanted to shout her name. I wanted to say, "Mama, we can leave. We can go anywhere. I will carry water. I will sleep outside. Just say the word." She didn't say the word. Something cracked in me, a soundless break, like a bone splitting beneath the skin. "Never," I whispered. My uncle smiled the way a door smiles when it locks. "You will not shame your father's name." My father's name shamed me, I said before I knew the sentence was mine. My voice shook. My knees did too. But the words were true, and truth makes its own legs. The Imam's eyes hardened. Careful, boy. I am careful, I said. Careful not to call darkness light. My uncle leaned back, measuring me. Do you think you know more than your elders? More than the Imam? No, I said, and my throat burned. I only know that a mother is not a duty you perform. She is a mother. He waved a hand like he was brushing off a fly. Language, Western, lies, sentimentality. We speak of honor, honor. The word tasted like iron in my mouth. My mother made a sound then. Not a word, just a sound. Small, cracked, like a pot breaking after too many fires. I turned to her for a second. Her eyes lifted to mine. They were full of oceans and desert and years I hadn't lived yet. Then the eyes dropped back to the rug, and the oceans dried again. Something inside me screamed, but my lips stayed closed because boys like me were trained to swallow screams. If you refuse, my uncle said, the community will know, they will talk, they will judge, your mother will be unprotected. You will be to blame, the Imam added, and Allah will judge the negligence of a son. They were building an altar and asking me to bleed on it. Let me say this to the one listening. Yes, you. If anyone ever hands you sin wrapped in piety, if anyone ever calls abuse honor and violation duty, you are allowed to run. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect what is holy by refusing what is wicked. I stood. My legs felt like wood. I said, never. My uncle's smile went flat. The room cooled. Sit down, he ordered. I didn't. For the first time in my life, I didn't. He reached for my wrist. I pulled away. He stood. The Imam stood. The shadow of them both fell over me like a cloth thrown over a birdcage. Think, Yusuf, the Imam said. The eyes of men are on your house. The angels record. The shame of a household without a head is great. I swallowed the acid rising in my throat. Then let them record this. I will not become the sin that killed my father's soul. The words surprised even me. They felt older than my mouth, like someone stronger had placed them there. My uncle's face shifted, something ugly moving beneath it. Blasphemy, he hissed. You always were ungrateful. Your father beat you too gently. The world tilted for a breath. I was 7 again, Quran in my hands, my father's palm exploding across my cheek because my tongue stumbled over a verse I didn't understand. Blood on my lip, my mother turning away, silence pressing me into the mat until I believed silence was God. I blinked the memory away. I'm leaving, I said. No, my uncle snapped. You will stay and you will listen. I have listened all my life. Then obey. I have obeyed all my life. He stepped closer, the smell of tea and stale breath and something rotten between us. Your father's place must be filled. It was never filled with love, I said. It will not be filled with filth. His hand flashed. I don't remember the slap landing, only the heat and the ringing, and my mother's small sound again, like a bird dying. The Imam did nothing. Silence did what it always did. It cheered for the strong. I wiped my mouth. My fingers came away wet. I will work, I said, steadying my breath. I will bring grain. I will bring oil. I will fix the roof. I will protect her from wolves. But I will not become one. You defy Allah, the Imam said. I defy you, I answered, surprising myself again. And whatever God blesses this. My uncle moved to grab me. I stepped back, bumped the wall, felt the cracked plaster claw my shoulder. The lantern flickered. The room seemed to lean toward me, listening for my next breath. I took it, then another. Then I did the thing I had not known a boy could do. I ran out the door into the night, past the well, past the fig tree, past the place where boys my age played at being men with sticks and stories. The sand slid under my feet, stones bit my soles. The moon watched, thin and merciless. Behind me, my uncle shouted. The Imam called my name like a curse. Another voice, my mother's, rose and fell and broke, and my chest broke with it. But I kept running, because sometimes the holiest thing you can do is flee. I ran until the houses became fields, and the fields became scrub, and the scrub became open darkness. I doubled over, hands on my knees, lungs on fire, stomach heaving bile into the sand. Allah, I gasped. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Is this you? Silence. It pressed against my eardrums, climbed into my mouth, sat on my chest. The same silence that greeted me when my father struck me. the same silence that hovered over my mother as she disappeared into her own body, the same silence that lived in the mosque like a king. I dropped to my knees. The sand was cold now, the night had sharpened. I wanted to tear my skin off just to escape my own bones. "If you are real," I said to whatever sky exists above boys like me, "show me or kill me. But don't leave me in this." No answer. Only wind scuffing across the scrub. Only a dog barking somewhere far away. Only the faraway murmur of a village that had decided what I must become. I lay down in the dirt. The earth was a hard bed, but it was honest. It didn't pretend to be holy while asking for my soul. Maybe you know this place. The place where men you were taught to trust ask you to bury your conscience. The place where words like honor become knives and duty becomes a room with no doors. The place where you would rather die than cross the line they painted in blood and called worship. If you do, hear me. You are not crazy. Your no is not rebellion. It is protection of what God made sacred. I waited in the dark for an answer that didn't come. Not yet. At some point the horizon bled grey, and the first bird called like it didn't know what men had done with the night. I stood, stiff, shaking through. Not sell my soul for a seat at a table where daughters and mothers are offerings, and sons are priests of their fathers' sins. I took a step, then another. The sun cut a thin blade over the ridge behind me. The village woke. Ahead of me, a silence that was not yet peace, but it was mine. That night, after wandering the outskirts like a ghost with a heartbeat, I pushed open the door of an empty mosque and whispered into hollow air, "If you're God, say something." The roof said nothing. The walls kept my secrets. I fell asleep on the cold floor. And in the dark between waking and dying, I felt a presence I could not name, close as breath, far as heaven, waiting. I lay on the cold mosque floor that night, ribs pressing against stone, my body a bundle of exhaustion. I had run until my legs became strangers. I had shouted at the sky until my voice broke. Now all I could do was breathe and wait for an answer. But heaven was mute. Do you know that silence? The silence that roars louder than thunder. The silence that feels like rejection itself. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark, "Allah, do you see me?" Nothing. The call to prayer rang out at dawn. The muezzin's voice split the air, strong, practiced, familiar. My body knew the motions before my mind agreed. I stood, bent, pressed my forehead to the ground. The rug smelled of dust and sweat. My lips moved with words I had memorized since childhood. Arabic phrases stacked on my tongue like stones I could not swallow. But inside I was empty. Every prostration felt like pressing my skull into a locked door. Every verse recited was a rope tied around my chest. I thought of my father, towering in memory, his hand descending across my face when I stumbled over a surah. I thought of the blood on my lip, and how I prayed then too, whispering, "Allah, stop him." Allah never stopped him. I remembered crying as a boy, fists balled under my thin blanket, whispering, "Allah, please don't let him come tonight." But the footsteps always came, the belt always uncoiled. The silence always swallowed my plea. And now, after what my uncle had asked of me, after the Imam's agreement, after the way my mother's eyes drowned in silence now, when I begged for clarity, for rescue, for any glimpse of God, again, silence. I walked out of the mosque with my heart like a hollow drum. The sun burned the ground. Children played in dust that smelled like goat dung. A woman hauled water in jars bigger than her hope. I watched it all and thought, does God only see the men in robes, the ones with beards and sticks and stones? Does he turn his face away when boys are broken and mothers erased? I wanted to scream in the street. Instead, I swallowed the fire until it burned my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. My body was tired, but my soul paced. The walls of the small hut I had stumbled into seemed to close around me. I pressed my palms to my face and whispered, "If you are there, God, why are you silent?" The silence deepened. I thought maybe God hated me. Maybe he had hated me since birth. Why else would I be born into fear? Why else would I inherit duty instead of love? Why else would men who call his name use his words to destroy? The weight was unbearable. My chest tightened until every breath was a battle. My mind screamed, "End it! Better no life than this kind of life." I fell asleep like that, clutching despair like a blanket. And then I dreamed. I was standing in a pit. The ground beneath my feet was thick with filth, mud and stench rising around my ankles. I tried to climb the walls, but every handful of dirt slipped away, crumbling under my fingers. The pit was too deep, the walls too high. My body stank. My clothes clung to me with shame. And then I heard it. My name, not shouted, not cursed, not like my father barked it, not like my uncle sneered it. This was different. Gentle, strong, like the way water sounds when it runs clear. Yusuf. I looked up. There, above the pit, a man stood dressed in white. Light clung to him. Not blinding, but warm, alive. His eyes met mine. And in those eyes, I swear he knew everything. The beatings, the silence, the shame. The demand that I defile my own blood. The years of bowing, reciting, begging into emptiness. He knew it all, and yet his eyes didn't recoil. They loved. He reached down, his hand. The white of his sleeve brushed the edge of the pit. His voice was steady. "You are not unclean, you're mine." I froze. My whole body trembled. Could this be real? Could any Holy One see me and still want me? I hesitated, ashamed of the filth covering me. But his hand didn't move. It waited. It beckoned. My soul leaped. My arms shot up. Our hands met. The moment his fingers touched mine, the filth dried. The pit vanished. I was standing on solid ground, my body clean, my chest light. He was beside me, so close I could feel the warmth of his presence, like fire that doesn't burn. I fell to my knees, weeping. He touched my shoulder. His words cut through the weeping. "You are loved." I woke up choking on sobs. My chest heaved like something had been ripped open inside me. My hands clutched the thin mat beneath me. My cheeks were wet. But something was different. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, like someone else was in the room with me. I whispered the only word I could remember. Jesus. The name burned my lips. Forbidden, dangerous blasphemy in the house I was raised in. And yet it felt like life. I lay there until dawn, whispering it again and again. Jesus. And for the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like peace. The next day, trembling with curiosity and fear, I searched secretly on a borrowed phone. Muslims who saw a man in white dream, and what I found changed everything. The morning after that dream, my body was awake, but my spirit was still trembling. I sat in the corner of the small room, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. The name was still on my lips. Jesus. It felt dangerous, forbidden, yet it also felt like oxygen. After drowning for years, I needed to know if I was insane, if anyone else had ever seen what I saw. So when the house was quiet, I borrowed a phone. Its screen was cracked. The letters on the keypad rubbed almost bare. My hands shook as I typed. Muslim dream, man in white. And there it was. Stories, videos, testimonies. Faces from countries like mine, men with accents like mine. Women in scarves, eyes filled with tears. Their words cut into me. I was Muslim, I followed every rule, but then, in a dream, I saw a man in white. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," and I knew it was Jesus. I sat frozen, heat rising to my cheeks. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't alone. One woman's voice caught me. She whispered. For the first time I felt loved, not used, not silenced. Loved, loved. I pressed my forehead against the cold wall and let the word echo. Loved. No one had ever said that to me and meant it. Not my father, not my uncle, not even my mother who was too broken to speak it. That night, I dreamed again. The pit was gone. Instead, I stood in a narrow alley. Dark walls rose around me. Chains rattled at my feet. I tried to move, but my ankles bled against iron. And then the same voice, Yusuf. I looked up. The man in white stood at the end of the alley. He lifted his hand. The chains snapped like twigs. "Follow me," he said. I woke up gasping, tears running hot down my face. My heart thudded. My body shook like I had just escaped prison. I wanted to shout his name into the night, but fear closed my throat because I knew if anyone heard me, if anyone saw what I was watching, reading, whispering, it would mean death. And then it happened. One evening I was watching a testimony on the phone. A man from Pakistan spoke of Jesus appearing in his cell when he was locked up for apostasy. He said, "Even here I am not forgotten." I didn't hear the door creak. I didn't hear the footsteps until my mother's shadow fell over me. Her eyes dropped to the screen. She froze, her lips parted. The reflection of the glowing phone lit her face. The word Jesus shone across the screen. Her hand trembled. "Yusuf, what are you doing?" I stammered. "Mother, please." Her eyes darted toward the window as if the whole village could hear us. She snatched the phone, clutched it to her chest and hissed. "Do you want them to kill you?" Her voice broke. She shook me by the shoulders, not in anger, but in terror. "If they find out, they will burn you, they will bury you alive. Promise me you will stop." But I couldn't promise, I couldn't let go. Not after what I had seen, not after his hand had pulled me from the pit. I lowered my voice. "Mother." He called my name. In the dream, he said, "I am his." Her eyes filled with tears. She slapped her hand over my mouth. "Never say that again. Not here, not to anyone." But her tears betrayed her. She was afraid, but she also knew I was telling the truth. That night, lying on the mat, my mother weeping quietly on the other side of the room, I whispered into the darkness, "Jesus, I don't understand, but I want you. Please don't leave me." And for the first time, I fell asleep, not dreading the night. At dawn, heavy fists slammed the door. Voices roared outside. My uncle's voice thundered, "Yusuf, come out, we know what you've done." The pounding on the door split the morning in two. Voices outside, angry, spitting fire. And then, his voice. "My uncle Yusuf, come out now. We know what you've done." My heart turned to stone. Mother froze, her eyes wild, her lips trembling. She whispered, "Don't say a word, don't breathe." But the door shuddered again. This time, the lock snapped. They stormed in, my uncle first, two cousins behind him, their eyes burning like torches. He held up the phone. The screen cracked. Frozen on the testimony I'd watched the night before, the name Jesus glowed like a curse in their hands. He threw it to the ground. The crack echoed louder than thunder. "Is this true?" he spat. "You've brought shame worse than death into this house. You follow the Kaffir's lies." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mother dropped to her knees, weeping. "Please, he's just confused. He doesn't know what he's doing." But I knew. I knew exactly what I was doing. They dragged me outside. Neighbors gathered. The Imam stood at the edge of the courtyard, his robe swaying in the wind, his face heavy with judgment. He raised his hand. "Yusuf, son of Rashid, has brought filth into this community. He dares to speak the name of Isa, not as a prophet, but as God. He is cursed. He is an apostate, and you all know the punishment." The crowd murmured. Some spat, some shook their heads. My uncle shoved me to the ground. Dust filled my mouth. Blood trickled from my lip. He leaned close, his breath sour, his words poisonous. "Recite the Shahada now. Deny this lie, or today will be your last." The Imam's voice cut through the air. "This boy has dishonored his father's grave. He must repent or face death." I looked around me, faces of men I had known since childhood, hands that once carried bread to me, eyes now filled with rage. And then I looked at my mother, her face pale, her hands trembling. Tears streaked her cheeks as she whispered, "Please, Yusuf, please, just say it." Her voice broke my chest in two, but I couldn't, because in the pit of shame, I had heard another voice, a voice that didn't condemn, a voice that said, "You are mine." I stood slowly, dust clinging to my clothes. My knees shook, but my voice was steady. "I cannot deny him. I saw him, the man in white. He called my name. I belong to him now." Gasps, shouts. My uncle's fist crashed into my face. Pain burst like stars behind my eyes. He dragged me into the center of the courtyard. The Imam's words were sharp as knives. "Stone him unless he repents. Stone him." Hands reached for rocks. The weight of death filled the air.